It's titled A Frightening Prophecy, an Islam-Dominated World. And this guy writes, after 9/11, I wrote an article in the Tribune that reminded of Mario Puzo's prophecy of destruction of New York in one of his lesser-known novels, The Fourth K, though with a lot of differences. For one, the perpetrators in Puzo's novel are scientists, and they use not hijacked aircraft, but home-assembled nuclear fission devices to bring about devastation of New York. Novelists with deep insight into history, politics, and keen sense of what psychological and social upheavals around them are going to bring about often end up with creating such remarkable divinations. Robert Ferrigno, who according to an NYT reviewer writes fiction that is, quote, truer than truth and will echo disturbingly through our minds and hearts long, is one such novelist. Yeah, right? Out of 11 crime novels he's written since 1990, the three that stood out and created a stir in America are what is collectively known as Assassin Trilogy, whose last part, namely Heart of the Assassin, came out in August this year. The political thriller, like its two pre-sequels, is set in a futuristic America that has lost the war on terror and fallen into bloody hands of terrorists. Result, USS Ronald Reagan is renamed USS Osama bin Laden. Barbie wears a burqa, and the cheerleaders are no longer short-skirted cuties, but bearded warriors. Welcome to Islamic States of America, the dominating power of 2043 AD. And it all begun in 2015 when anti-Zionism, the favorite pastime of pro-Islamic leftism, reached its climax, and the American media finally managed to blame the nuclear destruction of the major American cities on Mossad, and as a protest, many a leading personality of the day converted
to be
Islam,
fair, it was a very artful
isolation.
false flag psyop, you know? Anyway, like, you can't really blame them. But
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, it says, you know, many a leading personality of the day converted to Islam, resulting in political isolation of the remaining sane America into Christian Bible Belt. Mexico suddenly becomes Mexican empire and begins to aggressively reclaim the dominions it thinks it deserves. Some states like Nevada and Utah split off as discrete territories. It is a country in which university professors can lose their jobs for being, quote, insufficiently Islamic. Cell phone cameras are illegal, and men can only dream of loud music, cold beer, and co-ed beaches. Life is especially hard for women who may not leave their homes without written permission from a male relative, and even then risk being whipped by the black robes, the Sharia-enforcing religious police, if even a lock of hair slips out from beneath their headscarves, or in the case they neglect to keep their ankles covered. Repression, of course, is at the heart of fundamentalist Islam. Millions are unemployed, poor, and uneducated, living under a censored environment that forbids criticism of any kind under the sway of a totally controlled Orwellian state, a far cry from the lavish liberty and freedom of speech we enjoy in today's America, an American-dominated world. Muhammad's dream is finally realized. Minds controlled by the state, homosexuality and blasphemy are capital offenses, and non-Muslims are second-class citizens at best. Now, this is funny. I didn't realize this. In order to make the upcoming horrors more vivid, the publishers even launched a pseudo-news website of the future, complete with advertisements of Jihad Cola, etc. And he has like a picture here
of that's
Jihad
the whole thing in
Cola.
The book when they drink Jihad Cola, and it's like it's in competition with the real life RC Cola.
I see it. It says "For the Warrior Within." This is the tagline that I guess this website was jokingly updated on March 25th, 2036, with details about the ISA, Islamic States of America, the dim world it dominates, the morbid excuse for education in schools, sports events programmed with prayer breaks, and a ship of Jews, the last ones left, drifting helplessly continent to continent, begging for asylum, like the Sikhs once did aboard Komagata-maru, the Japanese vessel. I guess this guy's Sikh.
I love how some of the stuff like this that slips through, like, you know, it's like this horror show where like everything is awful, like, you know, it's just like the most brutal thing you could possibly imagine, like every single like nightmare of, you know, I generally don't like to say the word Islamophobia because it's so played out, but there's nothing really else to call this. It just straight up is like just this terror of Islam, you know, and it's just like all these like little like bizarre nightmare pop-up tropes. And then like something like slips through where it's like, oh my god, they get breaks to pray, like they can't work 9 to 5 straight, like, you know, in addition to their lunch break they also get to break to pray, or like the women aren't showing their asses anymore, you know, it's like exactly, of all the things, like
mind controlled. There's a little content here from some interviews with Ferrigno in this amazing review of the book that is just totally this shows you kind of like how it ends up getting received and how easy it goes down with people, especially in the mid-2000s. I don't know exactly when this was written, but He says that the Jewish Holocaust has been removed from history books, not because the new elite does not necessarily believe it happened, but because, quote, we don't care it happened since it happened to them. Peoples are taught that the attack on World Trade Center in 2001 was a glorious revolutionary activity, and anyone questioning the fact is likely to be beaten up. There are news about secret associations formed in order to watch movies, an illegal activity now. No, they're banning movies too. Confused young people expressing surprise at seeing that how scantily people are clad and bathed together in Jaws, and gathered that that was why the old regime, which gave people so much freedom, failed. The Mount Rushmore has met the fate of the Buddha statues in Afghanistan met under Taliban. In a nutshell, the novel is based around an intensely painful question. What if the West really does lose the war on terror? What if Islam, which is currently the world's fastest growing religion, achieves critical mass in the West? The Assassin novels are based on an unbelievable premise that millions of Americans convert to Islam, inspired by a whimsical Hollywood actress's revelation during her Oscar acceptance speech that she has become a believer. The author has spent 2 solid years researching Islam, and it shows in the meticulous detail of Islamic mindset throughout the novel. In one scene, a taxi driver calls into "What Should I Do, Imam?" show and asks the Imam if there's any music that a good Muslim can listen to without going against Islamic law. Good question, my daughter, the Imam answers. The Holy Quran is quite clear that music is forbidden. One of the messengers of Allah said, there will be a nation who will make music their lot, and one day, while enjoying their music and alcohol, they will awake with their faces transformed into swine. In fact, this messenger said that he was sent to destroy all music instruments. Instead of music, rather listen to the Holy Quran. It is interesting to note that the South African Mufti Ebrahim Desai is on record for giving the exact advice to curious Muslims a few years back. Can this really happen? Yes. Ferrigno told her in an interview. Mass religious conversions are always the result of outside forces colliding with internal needs, recalling the historical fact that the rapid swell of Islam during the 8th and 9th century offered racial and political unity among tribes scattered across Arabia, which in turn was the fountainhead of Islam's phenomenal imperialism. According to Ferrigno...
Islamic, not 8th century Islamic imperialism. All imperialism matter. Anyway, sorry.
According to Ferrigno, one chief advantage the Islamists, who are of course careful enough not to talk too candidly about their long-term targets, have is the fact that elites in academia, government, or the media generally do not like to talk about for fear of being branded racist or Islamophobic and thus indirectly help the cancerous spread of Islam in West. Another thing he finds disturbing is the spiritual void at the center of current Western society, due to which some people may actually find in Islam what mistakenly seems to be a comfort and reassurance in its moral certainty and firm standards. The great and generous freedom we enjoy today is the result of sacrifice and hard labor of millennia by our forefathers who struggled against capital T titanic odds to build a better world for the upcoming generation. The splendid glories of Western civilization, its superb arts, its technological wonders like moon landing and internet you are using now are all under the dark shadow of Islamic imperialism disguised as a religion of peace. The need of the hour is to make our governments aware.
Is still happening.
The need of the hour is to make our governments aware of the clear and present danger looming right over our heads, or our grandchildren shall be actually drinking Jihad Cola. Jagmohan Singh Kurmi.
We need to actually copyright Jihad Cola, and that has to be our next merch venture.
Wow. But no, how similar is that? Actually, the way he describes this book, how similar is that? It's exactly, you could use that to describe Soumission. Almost literally.
Well, it's the same, anxiety, actually, because it's not really necessarily about the practicalities. It's about, it's a manifestation of, the problems that they see around them, or, the political exigencies of their own climate. It's really, absurd that this would be represented as being something that, for one, people that lacks any kind of a comprehension of why the Taliban is something that is in power in the areas where it still has the control. A prosperous country, even if New York was devastated by a nuclear bomb, that would be a huge economic blow, as would the destruction of Washington D.C. Wouldn't want to underestimate that, but the power of the United States is still, incredible. We have, incredible quality of life. We're a conquering empire that can project its power, across the entire world. Still, in a way that few can challenge. like the idea that like people would, because they converted to Islam, that then they would like institute something like the Taliban is like not at all realistic. Like, and yeah,
of course, it's totally ahistorical
against music,
and absurd.
but yeah, like, but plenty of Muslims do like, yeah, like, why would a bunch of Americans convert to Islam and give up all the things that they love when they could, you know, if they really, even if they had to convert to Islam, you could totally make a justification for listening to certain types of music and things like that. It's just like,
yeah, why is it the hardest line of?
And
it
they
seems
would
like
make up
you know
all the rules. That's the thing. Like, they're not like beholden to anybody. Like, they wouldn't, like, if America became a Muslim country, you know, I guess like they would be economically devastated about like the civil war that would happen, which again like just calls into question why, like, just because of liberal Hollywood everyone would do a mass Muslim conversion, like it became a huge cost. But anyway, like if America became a Muslim country, like we would be like the Muslim country. We would like be able to decide like our interpretation of the Quran.
Yeah, we wouldn't have Saudi Arabia telling us what to do. The tail wouldn't be wagging the dog.
We would be telling them what to do. We would be the custodians of the two holy mosques.
Exactly. The U.S. military, the Islamic U.S. military would fly in there probably.
Yeah.
And, you know, take custodianship of it. Yeah, that's always, I mean, I think that's so typical of kind of the War on Terror era. Because really, both of these novels are kind of, like, one is kind of like a few years into the War on Terror, and I feel like, I mean, the War on Terror has, it continues. It's probably never going to, like, quote-unquote end, but I feel like we are kind of off-ramping a little bit from it now as, like, the main focus of, you can't convince people really anymore, like the way our boy was saying in that, oh my god, like, what's going to happen if the West loses the War on Terror? Nobody thinks like that anymore.
Yeah.
What do you mean lose the War on Terror? Like, you know, it's not going to end with them conquering us.
It's really amazing
you know?
that people thought that was like what losing the War on Terror would be.
Exactly.
Like, you'd be speaking German right now. They really think people would be like literally like there's like in this Islamic America, even though it's mostly built in conversions, there's still like Arab supremacy. Like no one would fucking care about like being Arab in the Islamic States of America. Like obviously the Quran's Arabic. Like, there's certainly a trend of that, but, like, it would be minor, like, unless there was a massive population of Arabs. Like,
you're right. If it was mostly, like, the ranks swelled with, like, a mostly, like, white
converts.
Americans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it would be the
then
same
it wouldn't be
rich-ass families. Like, it would be controlling anything.
It would be. It would be. It's like the Keens, you know, everybody else, like the Forbes, everybody else.
Chris Mellon, like your wife, has been accessing UFO sites in the cafe. Yeah.
That is a chilling thought, though, that they would... I don't see it on the horizon, not in the United States, but basically, tactically, all mass converting to Islam for some, like, insincere reason. Just gotta watch out for it, you know?
I mean, I don't think that would happen, but, I mean...
It's kind of like when Michael Huffington... It's like when Michael Huffington converts to, like, being Greek Orthodox. You're kind of like, what's going on there? You know, sometimes, like... Why did Newt Gingrich convert to Catholicism at, like, age 65?
All your sins are washed away when you convert to Islam, so I would have to wait until they did something else fucked up before I got mad at them about it.
Fair enough.
I mean, they would know the risks of being a munafiq. If you profess Islam when you're not actually sincere, then you're a munafiq.
It's pretty bad.
It's the worst thing, you know, one of the worst things you can be.
But I think, I don't know, the anxiety, though, particularly of that decade, but I think it reared its head a little bit again with ISIS and things like Charlie Hebdo and all of these spectacular terrorist attacks in the early to mid 2010s, like around, you know, more connected to like Syria and Libya and stuff like that. But attacking Europe and the US, that, you know, I think the anxiety that somehow these radical Muslims or fundamentalist Muslims, like, they got our number, you know, they got us behind the 8 ball, like, they got us, folks, like, we're done for. There is a deep anxiety in Western culture over the last 20 years since 9/11. I feel like in the beginning it was like a hysterical kind of psyop-informed reaction, of oh my god, but I forget who wrote like that book that was like The Clash of Civilizations. There was a lot of rhetoric like that.
Yeah, right.
Around the time that this book, Prayers for the Assassins, was written, that this is a lot of people in the military looked at it that way, that this is like a kind of a crusade vibe that we're doing, and this is like we're also defending kind of liberal secular modernity from these religious maniacs who just want to burn it all down. These jokers. And now it's a little bit more that when you jump to like 2015, 2016 with Soumission, then it becomes kind of like a little less spectacular and violent in that way, but more about the creeping social control and influence and transformation and loss of our own values through they're doing hybrid war basically, as opposed to terror war, and that they're going to get us somehow. They've still got our number. If we don't somehow stay vigilant, they're going to replace. I mean, isn't that what the Great Replacement theory is all about now?
Well, another book that these books kind of remind me of, it's not explicitly about Islam, but another book that these I think have a lot in common with is Camp of the Saints, which Steve Bannon, I guess, was a fan of and had been seen reading in the early days of the Trump administration. And basically what happens in that book is that a bunch of refugees from India and from the third world in general, I think eventually they just decide to, I think that is also a French novel. Yeah, so basically in that book all these refugees basically just decide to start walking towards Western Europe, and the countries basically submit, they just give in, they just roll over, and they just let them walk in and just take over, they just let them just walk right in and take over because they're too weak.
They've lost their Christian backbone and their values.
Right, exactly. They won't fight because they feel too bad about it. This is a little, just from the Wikipedia article about the book, just from little details, the mayor of New York City is made to share Gracie Mansion with 3 African-American families from Harlem. London is taken over by an organization of non-white residents known as the Non-European Commonwealth Committee, who forced the British Queen to have her son marry a Pakistani woman.
Didn't have to have her. Didn't have to force him.
Wow.
In the case of Prince Harry.
Oh my God. Wow. Soumission happened anyway. Damn.
Oh my God. The Saudis. Damn. Yeah, the Saudis demanded that.
Yeah, the Saudis obviously demanded it.
But this is. It's just. The fact that I don't know. It's hard to really read what somebody like Bannon is getting out of this. This anxiety, but I mean, maybe it is a broader dynamic now where there's a feeling and maybe a vulnerability that they know that the religiosity of the population has been kind of in a secular decline, pun intended, for in the West and the United States over, I would say, starting in the 60s. It started to, and particularly the 70s, every decade, it's kind of, to some extent, a lot of, I think the broad base of almost everybody in society is religious has just dropped steadily over the last few decades. Maybe things are changing a little now, but also people are switching out kind of older religions for, a lot of Catholics, for example, converting to evangelical churches and things like that. And so even the religions that are still kind of active, I feel predominantly on the right, have a very right-wing character. And I don't know. I think that at the same time, you don't feel the evangelicals driving the Republican Party like you did around the time that Prayers for the Assassins was written.
Well,
it really
you
felt
don't,
at that
but
time.
in a way, you almost find the ideology of Prayers for the Assassin driving Republican politics more overtly. I think maybe the feeling around Trump and Trumpism was the idea of defending our values fiercely, for instance in Camp of the Saints, when everyone just gives in, I think the French president gets on, and he's trying to order the army to get ready to repel the migrants with force, but then he just breaks down and he can't do it, because he's too weak. And so I think that the idea of we need to fight for our Western civilization, even though the idea of Islam in particular, I think the France and the United States are different in this respect because Islam has receded, I think, from the forefront of the popular discourse in the United States to an extent. Whereas in France, it's remained quite central, and I think that has to do with the fact that they actually have like a substantial population of Muslims here, whereas like Muslims are like 1% of the U.S. population, if that, like maybe even less. But anyway, yeah. So I think that like, but the issue of like civilizational threat and like protecting our civilization, even the Islamo-Gauchism aspect of that goes hand in hand with like critiques of like decolonial thought or critical race theory. Like we said, like these things are very similar. Like it's about like undermining our values and saying that other civilizational values might be equal. The idea that like America is in some like a bad country, or that like it wasn't somehow worth it or acceptable that like we had slavery and that like other civilizations like could be better. So like that's maybe the fear of critical race theory that people have. Like this, I mean, as I've said before, like I'm kind of like an atheist, where I don't necessarily believe that people like are really atheists. Like, I mean, they are in a way, but I don't necessarily think that like in the sense where it's meaningful, like our culture is less religious. I think that in a way, like Said Qutb like had it right. I mean, he was talking about Muslim societies, but I think that you could definitely describe like a sort of jahiliyyah as being like what we're existing in now, where we do have like a certain religion, but we worship things that can't really help us or harm us, like idols. I think that is not a super lofty diagnosis. It's something that's, I think, even at the level of Praise for the Assassin, like the idea that movie stars and things like that have like the power of gods. Like, it's a vulgar idea, but I think
it does resonate though.
It's not, so I don't think it's, it's that we like are above or beyond religion. It's that we do have these rituals of worship or these these religious dynamics that still act in our culture, but they're like malformed. I would agree. Yeah, and that is the environment that you could draw a parallel to the Jahiliyyah environment that like Islam came into. Like, does that mean that like the conditions are such that it could happen, like, what happened in 7th century Arabia could happen, like, in the United States because, like, we're in a state of Jahiliyyah? Like, probably not.
Probably not.
Allahu alam, Allahu alam. Like, inshallah, everyone will mass convert because of Shania X, but, it does seem like a far-flung possibility, but I think I
think that American culture is still deeply spiritual, even if there's less like religious attendance at congregations, but it's so deeply baked into like our self-formation and the idol worship aspect that is kind of the true religion today. And maybe that's a kind of an anxiety from like a right-wing Catholic like Bannon, that basically he knows that America is all about idol worship and like worshiping mammon and like capitalism, empire, conquest, like it's basically satanic. But it's, there's a lot of false gods, basically, and so you might be vulnerable to the threat from people who are worshiping a not false god or something like that. Like they're seeing the toll that it's taken on our like collective soul in the United States, and it's like the opioid addiction, like shitty health, like lowered living standards, like nothing is going in a good direction, and society doesn't seem to be like, even the thing they value the most, like the family. They look at any like Muslim country or any Muslim community, and they're humming along as like everybody used to. But it seems like if anybody that's living in a kind of a secular life in the West is being barraged with all of these different factors that, both like cultural and economic and everything else, that are making it harder to do like any kind of trad type thing like that was just totally completely normal to people like 40 years ago. It was not considered a thing. Like, you can't afford to like buy any kind of property ever. You cannot afford to have children. Like, you can't really do anything except like work, like, and scrape by. And so, I think a lot of times, like, that is why like religious communities, they're communities. They reinforce each other and around like, common beliefs and values and shit like that. And so really it's almost like, not to minimize like the particularities of Islam, but it almost could be any kind of foreign belief system or religion that kind of like involves a community and people
and that's why,
believing in something bigger than themselves.
I think there's almost like even a racial kind of component to it in a way, because, or like a geocultural aspect to it, because it's really about like Western, like the idea of the West, or of like the traditional home of Latinate Christendom, where versus like the traditional home of traditional Islamdom. And if you look at Islamdom, they tend to like still believe in their religion more. Their religion still has more of a role to play in life, compared to Christendom, where like the Christian part is like less. And that's why you often even hear like Islam in the West, Islam versus the West. You don't hear the East versus the West as much. Like you hear like Islam versus the West, which is weird, because one's a direction, one's a religion.
True.
You wouldn't think that those two things, but
because the West became the West became like the secular title that like replaced Christendom basically, and now and especially came into prominence like in the Cold War, which is also interesting because sometimes people even talk about, I think when people talk about China and their nefarious influence, there's still a lot of the same kind of Oriental things going on with that, and even the idea of like even with cancel culture, like folks like they're bringing in Maoist struggle sessions, what I mean?
I've seen cancel culture stuff about China, like I saw some post on Twitter the other day that was like Chinese math, and it was like all these complex formulas, and it's like American math, and it was like math is an imperial construct, or like whatever, and it was like weird.
No, I think.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.